morning, everyone. Namaste. Welcome to this session. Very specially today's session where we are going to talk, more about injections to inner balance. Now, what this is a very interesting topic where we're going to, kind of totally explore the different options available. The people are talking a lot about, how do I reduce my weight, how do I manage a lot of other things with respect to my health. So there's a lot more to it. So in the session, I'm very happy to be the moderator today, and I'm Dr. Vasudha Sharma, the co-founder and medical director of Vivekananda Health Global, which is a chain of integrated medicine clinics. I come with a background of Ayurveda, graduation of Ayurveda, with a post-graduation PhD in yoga therapy. It's really I'm glad to have Dr. Lata here today as a expert speaker. She's a senior friend of mine, and we've known each other for a fairly long time. Should be around 25 years now. So before we get into the session, it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Lata today, and you will be very sure why we have selected Dr. Lata or requested her to be the expert, speaker for today. Well, she's been in the field for a very long time, almost 3 decades of experience. Presently, the Chief Scientific Officer of Atrium Pharmaceuticals Private Limited, based out of Bangalore. She's the founder of Atrium Biotech, and that's been operational from 2016. And she has also had and her graduation to post graduation in Ayurveda with specific reference background to Dravya Guna, the pharmaceutical aspect of what Ayurveda talks about. And then she's further proceeded to complete her MS in drug discovery and development at UCL London. And presently she is pursuing her PhD in medicinal chemistry from MIT Manipal. So a lot of research work she's done, and then she has definitely contributed largely to the publications in this domain. Not only this, since she's a achiever in her own domain, and she's really done extremely well and in the field of Ayurveda and bridging the gap between Ayurveda and modern science. So therefore won the Super Achiever Award as a women entrepreneur by the Delhi Management Association, and lot many noticeable awards. Um, Recently, an Achiever Award by Public TV, which was called Nadi Narayani on Women's Day 2023. So, with this short note, I welcome Dr. Lata once again. We will have a very inquisitive discussion, I'm sure, in the next 1 hour, and I look forward for more. We will also have some questions open for audience at the last 15 minutes once we finish the discussion. So we'll easily have an hour today, and looking for meaningful deliberation to impact better to the society. Yes, Dr. Lata, I would like to hear from you, and then we'll go ahead with some questions.
Good morning, Dr. Vasudha, and all people here who are interested to actually not just listen to us, basically discuss about the very relevant topic on trending today. Thanks for the generous introduction as well. Probably this must be the right time, as a poster also, where weight loss drugs are being flooding in the Indian market very soon, being more accessible than ever before. The concern is all the more growing now. So I think it's a good time to go back to our roots, go back to the practices that probably we have forgotten. We have put them in the backstage to bring them to the front stage now.
So, we are talking a lot about different products. I think Ozempic and some of them are the key word we hear. Social media is hyped around this. So, one of the trade name is called Ozempic, and it offers some quick results for weight loss, as we see. But basically, it's an anti-diabetic, injection which is used While we talk about Ayurveda, which is providing a lot of sustainable formats to management of lifestyle disorders like obesity, diabetes, and a lot more, where we work on the root cause levels. So here we are just trying to explain the differences, trying to bring a lot of educated formats. We are not trying to say something is wrong and something is highly right and has to be used this way. We are now really trying to explore. We want to bridge the gap and say, give our perspective to this concept. So therefore, the session is going to talk about the injections to inner balance, where we are exploring a lot more with specific attention to this particular area. So, Dr. Lata, just to break down, right, I request you to start maybe with this explanation to what Ozempic is all about, what this word means, and what Mounjaro is all about.
Okay. This has been, of course, there are class of drugs called GLP-1 analogs, which mimic a biohormone, which is called GLP-1, which is important as a satiety hormone, basically. And in fact, these mimicking hormones have been in the market since, I guess, 2020 outside. But the hype and all these concerns are growing because, especially the semaglutide, the, the component in Ozempic and Wegovy, they are running out of the patent from this March, actually. And we have tens of companies making the generic version of that. And it is available in India at a very low cost. And in India, the regulation of markets as far as the pharmaceutical medicines are concerned. Though this is a class, did we lose the connection? Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So since the regulation is loose, I'm sure is some of the thing the like I mean social media is so very alert nowadays, so you get to know things much faster than so they even I heard clinicians who are not actually in fact this is a class H drug. So that means it is supposed to be prescribed only by doctors, specialists. In fact, only endocrinologists, then cardiac specialists. These are people who are supposed to prescribe that, but I'm sure people can access this drug much easier than anywhere outside India. This is where the concern lies because when it because first of all, this is not a drug which was developed or marketed for obesity itself. It was a drug marketed or developed for type 2 diabetes, that too very uncontrolled type 2 diabetes, which can have a morbid weight, obesity, where you have higher BMI, not just, simple overweight situations, where you have a BMI more than 30, 31. Such are the people with a lot of other metabolic issues like hypertension, cardiovascular, very high lipid profiles, high grade of inflammation, high HSCRP levels, and these people are supposed to take this medication. But when the side effect found out to be, very severe weight loss, naturally that is, I think, any drug that claims to have weight loss effect will click in the market because weight gain itself revolves around lot of complicated aspects of once it's very hard to lose weight. So when you see a magic drug like this which is reducing your weight maybe 20%, 15 to 20% within 3-4 months, definitely people will queue up to take that without understanding the real repercussions or consequences of long-term usage of that. So this is concerning actually. So these are class 1, I mean class H drug. In fact, there are Mounjaro is it has still not lost its patent. In fact, Mounjaro, I think its patent is expiring in 2030. Mounjaro is a dual um, analog, basically, which mimics two hormones, which are GLP-1 and GIP. So, which also has, which is claimed to have a higher weight loss compared to the mono analog like semaglutides. So currently, semaglutide is the one which is going to flood the market. And basically, when you see its activity, how it works, that itself actually hinders somebody should, to use that in the first place, unless until one is very, very morbidly obese. Even there, when you understand the rebound effect of that and unsustainability of weight loss, I'm sure one should switch to natural solutions in any stage of obesity. But maybe in a very, very morbid obese situation and metabolic disorder, probably it is justifiable to use it for a short period of time, where it actually affects the appetite centers. So it crosses the blood-brain barrier, controls the appetite center, affecting the hypothalamus so that we feel full all the time. We don't feel that hunger, that cravings has stopped, food noise goes down. All sounds very good, but it's imagine being in that situation for more than 1 or 2 years, and the moment you stop that, everything comes back, probably comes back with vengeance. The weight gain happens, appetite returns, but by that time, lot of loss, especially in the body, has happened, because more than 40% of the weight loss that happens due to the use of this semaglutide is actually the muscle loss. That is very concerning, because muscle is very, very important. And in the Indian scenario, if you see, already people have less amount of muscles, and in obese individuals it is all the more lower in strength, and losing even that amount of muscle will put you in a very bad scenario, because muscle is not just for strength, it's a metabolic organ basically. It improves the glucose uptake. Imagine you going skinnier with the muscle loss and the fat loss, and again get into a stage where insulin resistance comes back because of poor muscle storage. And you have sarcopenia. Apart from that, you have osteopenia, bone strength goes off. So with all this, we just go skinnier, and what are we actually aiming at? Being skinnier with all these health implications, is it really worth it? And the the advice you get while you use this semaglutide is to have enough proteins, enough water intake, because there can be a very severe dehydration. In fact, people have gone into kidney injuries as well in some of the, and a lot of malnutrition because you are not absorbing things. And with all these, how can you have that much of protein? How can you have enough amount when you have no appetite? You have all the time, because the stomach gastroparesis, or the stomach, the contents of the stomach doesn't move out easily. Gastric emptying time is slowed down because of this continued receptor stimulation by the GLP-1 analog to be specific. So how will the person be able to, have the enough amount of proteins to maintain the muscles, and have the energy to maintain the muscles for exercise? So it is definitely a very, very tough situation if a person starts this. Of course, on the scale, they will lose weight. But for any obesity patient, I would say that should not be the goal. Just a weight loss should not be the goal. Weight loss can be a secondary thing, but a metabolic health, to improve the metabolic health should be actually the goal, right?
Yeah, truly, truly. So, as Dr. Lata was talking, maybe you would just get a little confused because we have a mix of participants. Some of them are doctors, some of them are staunch followers or patrons of Ayurveda yoga. So, very important that we just understand that there is a mixed group. So
Oh, okay.
here,
Probably we should have taken a uh, poll in the beginning. How many have? But I'm sure in today's world, most are medically aware, at least because
yeah,
of the media presence.
true, true.
Yeah, and of course they can always question us back with anything
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is
very, very, very true.
not
Very true.
understood
Correct. So just to
or
give that
missed.
initial understanding, glucagon actually works with insulin to maintain glucose for the audience, just to understand. And it's also produced by the pancreas. So we are talking about certain drugs like Ozempic, which actually help in, interfering with the glucose metabolism and therefore working on the obesity management. Just to continue on the discussion further, so we definitely talk about, Ayurveda, the dosha principle of Ayurveda, the hormonal regulation which Ayurveda talks about, and we focus on the root cause management rather than suppression. And it promotes sustainable weight management through diet, herbs, therapies, without a lot of dependency. So, I probably would request Dr. Lata to give some more insights to this and what exactly happens, physiologically in the body, because many of us are aware, and many of them, because of more educative information available on the internet, and now it's more so because of the presence of AI. So they know that Ayurveda offers a lot of therapies. We talk about Panchkarma, we talk about Udvartana, we talk about many other herbs or Ayurveda formulations which are used in the sustainable weight management route. So, what exactly happens in the body? How do these interventions work? So, I would request you to probably give more insights here.
Right, as you said, some people may not be completely aware of the biochemistry that's happening. What I would like to just make to bring everyone on the same platform before getting into the intervention. Again, in the intervention, I would say natural methods have to be by involvement of um, emotional, mental, and physical part of the eating itself. So that will be the first thing, because the moment this GLP-1 hormone that is secreted usually in the gut, it is mostly happens by the L cells that in the distal gut, that is intestine. After the stomach, there are intestine. Then you have the large intestine, the small intestine, large intestine. In fact, very interestingly, there's also this GLP-1 which are produced in the larger intestine to have a longer sustained feeling of fullness so that you don't have cravings. But when this can be possible is when we eat very slowly, when we eat very mindfully, because the moment we start chewing, within few minutes the signal goes to because both the gut and the brain are interconnected, in fact through a very important nerve called vagal nerve. So vagus nerve understands that the food is going to come and we need to start working now itself. There are some hormones which will give you a hunger sensation. There are some hormones which will give you stop sensation. Those are leptins. And all these hormones, the whole interconnection that happens with vagal nerve communication to the hypothalamus, and that in turn tells this appetite. Once you start eating slowly, the stretch sensation that happens in the stomach, when the stomach starts getting stretched, that mild stretch sensation, there are something called mechanoreceptors. They will return back and say, okay, the stomach is getting full. Now that's when we have to stop eating. But this GLP-1 that actually tells you that hormone doesn't stay for a long time. The moment it is, maybe within 15 to 20 minutes or by 30 minutes, the peak happens. The concentration of this hormone naturally peaks up in the blood, and we understand that the food, that it is sufficient now. But then, in case you are not mindful in eating, you will override all these signals. You will not understand whether, because the amount of time this hormone really stays in the body is very slow. I mean, very less. Within about 5 minutes, this hormone gets degraded because we should not be in this satiety hormone state for a long time. That is the understanding, right? Otherwise, if you are completely satiated, you don't feel hungry for a long time, that is a disease condition actually. So for the body, what it does is it immediately degrades that. And by the time, if everything is well, you are mindfully eating, you get this initial surge of GLP-1. The second surge happens when the food reaches about helium. That's about, say, it'll take about 3-4 hours, where fermentation, in fact, the bacteria, especially the fermentation products like these fibers, when we say eat fibers, this is because fibers result in the production of something called short chain fatty acids in the colon. So indirectly releases this GLP, will keep you, satiated, full for a longer duration of time, keeping you away from binging, again snacking in between. So this is how the nice metabolic thing happens. But when when we're not mindful in eating, when we eat very fast, these signals can be overridden. When we eat very processed or high carb food, what happens is these are not volume wise, um they're very calorific, but volume wise they're less. So the stomach doesn't feel that satiety. These signals don't go back to the brain again. So again, the satiety signals, GLP-1 is not secreted. Then what happens? You have this liquids. Now we have this habit of drinking a lot of smoothies or on a liquid diet. This will not give you that stretch signal in the stomach. Again, satiety is not appreciated. So in these situations, we actually tend to eat more than required. This is when, in fact, if you see in today's world, we have made food as a kind of celebration. Most of the time we will be enjoying with people, we will be talking, we will be doing all kind of things and keep hogging food. It was not the situation when in the olden days, at least in Ayurveda, it is said, remember, ahasan, ajalpan. You are not supposed to smile, you are not supposed to talk while eating. Why all this? This is because of that. We have to only concentrate on the food. So if we totally we've gone back, gone too long actually from the natural methods. Now it feels difficult to come back. So another problem with using this GLP-1, when it suppresses, see, food is also a happy thing. When we are doing even alone, when we are having, it gives you some pleasure when you eat. These pleasure centers are actually suppressed. So you don't feel like eating, you don't feel, it doesn't give you, this is what actually semaglutide or any other GLP-1 analogs do, so that you don't feel cravings. But in turn, it also actually numbs the brain so that you don't feel, over time, you lack this pleasure at because the dopamine rewarding pathways are affected. Imagine how boring the life becomes then.
Yeah, so just to intervene here, so you made a very interesting, a very very important point about what actually happens. So in the same line, when we want to understand what is the difference when we say how does say a panchkarma, that is the Ayurveda detox procedure or an Udvartana procedure, impact and help us lose weight without really numbing our pleasure centers, without really working the way a GLP-1 drug would do.
Right. See, first of all, my concern is we should not look at weight loss as a goal. Even when we do Panchakarma, even when you think of, you must understand that it resets the metabolic health. So the weight loss that happens with Panchakarma is actually again a byproduct. When you do have a water loss situation there, you do have some amount of fasting, some amount of calorie deficit when you're going for a patya kind of situation. With all this, we also, so this actually, there are studies which have shown by doing this gut cleanse, there are good bacteria, bacteroids, which are important in producing those propionic acids or and other short chain fatty acids to improve the metabolic health. That has been improved after the panchakarma and other fasting methods actually. So this should be looked again as a metabolic reset than just looking at, I keep getting patients, can I do panchakarma and lose weight? You should not go for panchakarma again just to lose weight. Of course, weight loss is happens during that time, but I would still say again, once you, any kind of, if you don't address the root cause of binge eating or emotional eating or right kind of food, if you're not adding the soluble fibers in your diet or proteins in your diet, you will, or even this is a good thing. See, in Ayurveda, this bhukta supari bhuktam. It's a very bad, never should do, keep eating. This frequency of eating, increased frequency of eating, that also should be, because that what it does is it continuously eating, and there is a continuous sugar spike happening, and this again numbs the brain sensation of satiety. All those centers get numbed. So those things, of course, panchakarma as well. Another aspect in panchakarma is we use something called lekhaniya basti. Lekhaniya basti are those medications that are useful in varieties of, because obesity is not just by by just suppressing the appetite, it doesn't go. You have to improve the fat cell oxidation. That has to happen. You have to improve the cardiorespiratory framework, so you actually breathe well. In fact, pranayama also does the same way in actually improving the fatty acid oxidation, because most of the time these metabolically active fats are the visceral fats, not the subcutaneous fats mostly. That's when your waist circumference increases, they say it's very tough. So these are the ones when we do udvartana, there is a good amount of lymphatic drainage that happens. So all these in total gives you, apart from the metabolic health, weight loss as well. But weight loss should not be taken as a primary thing why you should get into panchakarma. Again, panchakarma is also should be, the patient has to be evaluated whether he's right for panchakarma, whether he's, for us, everything has become like a wedding, pre-wedding, quick solution.
Pre-wedding preparation of the couple.
Yeah. There are even people who get into some amount of surgical methods. Of course, not the bariatric surgery. There is another surgical method called ingesting a balloon, actually, allurion balloon. People do it before wedding, to a few months before wedding, so that the amount of food that goes in comes. I mean, that kind of, that mindset should change, actually.
Very true. We cannot take fast fixing routes in the
Yes,
with
and
the idea to
understand what
lose
that
weight.
fast fixes do. What that fast fix can never fix your real
Yeah,
health, actually.
yeah, true.
It can only harm you. And what fun doing the same. All these, imagine you take all semaglutide for 1 to 2 years. People are taking for 4 to 5 years. I don't know what kind of newer and newer side effects are being seen. So with all that, after that 4 years also, you come back with lesser muscle than what you had, and again you will have to work on your food intake, emotional eating. Imagine these 3 years, if you had worked on that, by the end of 3 years, you would have really become healthier and with the weight loss.
Very true. So I think people are getting influenced by wrong content, a lot of social media, binge watching, and since we had this session, I was just trying to check, response of different many doctors on social media, especially senior doctors. So it was very good to hear what Dr. Devi Shetty was saying, or what Dr. Naresh Trehan of Vedanta was saying. That GLP-1, I think it's just being hyped, and there's a market getting created maybe for sales, but not looking at the health of individuals. So we definitely cannot take temporary fixes, and we have to look at long term repercussions, because we are having an average age of at least 65 years now, and we cannot mess up with the healthy aging process. And I'm sure everybody will agree, and I think most of them want to hear all this to take their decisions as well. And maybe somebody is not looking at it, but they would, this information will play a very key role in taking a lot of decisions for themselves, because they are finally there to restore their health, right? So but research also, as we're just talking about the information available, when I just was trying to see what are the number of articles on PubMed, when we just see maybe having the keyword search as a GLP-1 agonist, obesity, and RCT, I was also taken aback to see that we did not have much articles. So if we see the modern medicine perspective, then they should have promoted this only through large number of RCTs. So I only saw 28 RCTs, which mean randomized controlled trials, where the keyword GLP-1 agonist obesity was used. So the rage versus the evidence doesn't seem to match. So just maybe your comments on this.
Yeah, see, after the marketing, actually, many side effects are being reported. It's also that, of course, I think if you change some search word, you will get more studies. 28 is too less a number. I think we do have, of course, studies are there, step trials, pioneer trials. There are large number of people involved, but it has not, I don't think it has worked, studied on all kinds of ethnicity. What kind of basal metabolic health, for what Indians have. We don't know all completely. And in fact, many of the box warnings are being added after the market, even 1 in 10,000, for example, one of the vision loss, the blinding that happens, vision loss, acute optic neuropathy happens, one of the NION, it is called. So that is said to be 10,000. But imagine the amount of people who is a market for this is quite a huge number, where you can get a lot of such complications, though it has not, because you can't have more than 10,000 or 20,000 in an RCT, or even large extended trials. But basic market for diabetics, at least in India, minimum diabetics itself is 10 to 15 crore people, and pre-diabetics will be all the more higher. Obesity, apart from diabetes, you have another few crores. So when such people are being targeted, I'm sure these number, in spite of 1 in 10,000, very rare when they say, can get to be very, very upsetting numbers.
Yeah, I agree. So, we spoke about many Ayurveda therapies and efficacy, the way of physiological actions, etc. So, just shifting some attention towards herbs. Ayurveda is known for many different herbs used for different conditions. So, any initial start which people should do at home so that we start reducing the burden of diabetes in the society, and some lifestyle regulations I think is very important for us to discuss also. Lifestyle includes anything, different other exercise regimen people follow, and they have their own interests towards a specific exercise regimen. Maybe we'll start with understanding some local herbs. Now we are now hosting this from Bangalore, and we have most of them attending this session in from this location. So depending on the climatic conditions, we talk about Okasatma in Ayurveda. So we also talk about different herbs being used in different seasons or ritus. So keeping all these perspectives, do share some information about how people can probably start taking care from their homes using certain herbs in their cooking or in
Yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
requirement supplementation.
Right, very true. Actually, in fact, I would say most of the things start from the kitchen itself. We have enough materials there which can help in this aspect. First, of course, first and foremost would be go back to the roots, the way we used to eat. Don't complicate food, you know. And in fact, very interesting, read somewhere about this takra, which we end the food with, This, in fact, naturally promotes GLP-1. We should look for such things which can naturally promote GLP-1 stimulates and GLP-1 secretion in the body so that we stop, overeating. We don't binge eating or we stay satiated for long time. These bitters and astringent property of this chakra is support,
Buttermilk.
yes, buttermilk, sorry. So when it touches the tongue receptors itself, they have seen GLP-1 getting secreted in the body. And also there is another hormone called DPP-4, that is dipeptidyl peptidase 4, which in the body, it actually degrades GLP-1. So there are some herbs. Probably, my guess is probably those were the herbs which in Ayurveda they have told pachana, improves digestion. Because when those herbs like curcumin has those qualities, and many of these onions or garlic, they have some compounds, allicin or quercetin. All these can inhibit the enzyme actually who degrade the GLP-1 so that GLP-1 stays in the blood for a longer duration. Of course, not as long as the semaglutide, which is unnatural, but in normal way. So that way, we must ensure that since we also have people who are not from the medical, I would say we need to have a food sequence while eating. We need to start the food with nutritionally dense, like a lot of vegetables, a lot of fibers, because these are the ones which will start, filling up the stomach. Then soluble fibers, which are very much, present in our methi. Methi is the fenugreek seeds. When you soak, you can see those uh, soft, what do you say, those emulsified material. Those are the soluble fibers, or flaxseed when they become a slush-like thing. These, or even the people are using the isabgol husk also. But these are the ones which can, soluble fibers. They help to keep uh, the gastric emptying time increased so that the food doesn't leave and result in high sugar spike. Include proteins in your diet, especially dals and the legumes like rajma, kidney beans, all these kind of mutter, peas. These have a good combination of both fibers and proteins in them. Of course, you can add non-veg protein as well, meat, fish, all these things. So include protein, fibers. Then, of course, you can end with buttermilk as our ancient way of ending the food. This will definitely help in and add these kind of herbs. As I said, most of us use them, curcumin, jeera, or the onion, garlic, these kind of materials, they will tend to have higher GLP-1, staying for a longer duration of time, improving your sugar spike.
So that's why it's very important for audience to understand, for everyone to understand why Indian cooking has been so well designed. So
Yeah.
we of course know that the roots are coming from science like Ayurveda, but it has been so integrally, inherently carried in our genetics as well, that we still use the similar formula. So we should not get carried away by just the Western influence in the wrong way. So we have to bridge and say, how do we take the best from the West and definitely not lose what we have actually got across the decades. And the kitchen is therefore a very very useful area where all the tools available in the kitchen, I'm sure, has to be used. And that's the beginning for a lifestyle change. Now adding on to this is of course our own Indian system of yoga. A daily regimen of yoga is a very very integral part of our lifestyle. So we again, there are many exercise regimens which are available. Somebody likes to just go to a fitness center, they want to do different types of martial arts, like mixed martial arts, to a lot more. Somebody just wants to build muscles, and they're always there trying to check how much of biceps and triceps I have probably gained, and try to tone myself. So with so many things available, a lot of confusion around, people do not know what to choose. And many times when we say no, make yoga an integral part of your lifestyle, yes, we don't deny, or we don't say do not go to the gym, do not do any other cardiorespiratory activity, but bring in yoga as a part of your lifestyle. So what are your comments there, Dr. Lata?
Definitely. I mean, I'm all for yoga. Uh, and also, I wanted to add to the earlier what I said. We should not, there are two things we should have a attitudinal shift about hunger and demonizing fats. It's also very important. Hunger is a very biological, good hunger is said to have, you are healthy. But unfortunately, the hunger that we are following, like emotional driven, all those things, fake hungers, we should be able to separate it from. Otherwise, setting up the right hunger in right time is very important. Making this something called biological intelligence, you need to reset those things. Also, I said regarding yoga, of course, many people have this misunderstanding that yoga is only for stretching. I think people who have really done yoga will realize how much of body weight, exercise it is. Actually, it is kind of a weight training also, but no harm in adding the weights, especially when you're, after 40, starting after 40, when the muscle is being lost at a faster rate. Definitely, it's good to add things, the weights to improve the muscle strength, which is very, very important because ensure that you improve the amount of muscle. In fact, there is also a section. Sometimes your body mass index (BMI) can go higher when you have a very toned muscles, because muscles are more denser than fats actually. So muscles on the scale you may actually weigh higher than those who have large amount of fat in the body. But that is on a good note. Actually, it's good to develop these muscles. Definitely, exercise should become a part of life. At least 30 minutes of walking for everyone. And apart from that, this pranayama, I think I'm sure you will be a better person to tell that. But personally, I after practicing pranayama, I have got real good benefits, and it's also studied that by improved oxygenation, the fat oxidation is better. So it is not just production of the fat, but the utilization of the fat into energy reserve. Happens better with all different kinds of pranayama breathing techniques. In fact, In Japan, they do this cenobi. I'm sure you must have heard of that. Cenobi is a pranayama technique. It's a breathing technique with a little bit of stretching. In fact, when you see that, it looks like the starting of Surya Namaskara actually, and doing the breathing in that, and some small amount of groups of studies have shown weight loss actually at the end of regular practice. So I'm sure with these kind of pranayama, right amount of food, and at the end, again, going back to my goal should not be to lose weight, but to become metabolically healthy. I think that should be the mantra for all Indians actually, where we are actually getting into metabolically unhealthy situation. If you see, not just being obese, but with other cardiovascular inefficiency, muscle tone being lax, no good muscles. So with all this, we are getting into metabolically unhealthy situation from where we have to come out.
Yeah, very
Of course,
true.
it
So though
is
we are
harder.
highlighting, yeah,
Correct.
though we are highlighting about obesity, diabetes today, but it's very important that we tackle all the lifestyle disorders where India has started ranking, for every other lifestyle disorder we see, and it's
Yes,
important
yes.
that society understands the impact which our lifestyle creates on probably getting vulnerable to a lifestyle disorder. So
Yes, it is
therefore,
not
yes,
just type 2 diabetes. Like with low
yeah.
muscle reserves, we have poor immunity as well. With low
Mhm.
muscle reserves and heavier weight, we only increase the load on the bones, making it go osteoporotic, osteopenic. So, what kind of health we can expect?
Correct, correct. Yeah, very true. So I think we have spoken a lot, keeping the time in mind, and we just can have the last 10 minutes before we close. We might overshoot about 5 to 10 minutes as well. But before we just leave it to the audience to ask some questions, you've been doing a phenomenal job at Atrimed, and you're definitely brought in reduced gap. You're trying to bridge the gap between the traditional wisdom, modern approaches. So, with this context of lifestyle disorders, how is Atrimed taking a step ahead?
Yes, as a pharmaceutical company, I would say we are working on developing, as I said, another DPP4 inhibitors, which naturally improve the GLP-1 than, also natural GLP-1 analogs like, berberine. Berberine is also known to have GLP-1 analog activity, but not to the extent as the semaglutide or, popular ones. But as we all discussed, I think by this time people should know that much of longer. In fact, just to give you numbers, the normal GLP-1, I told you, the one which is secreted by our body, stays only for few minutes, whereas this is going to stay for longer, every day, all throughout actually. So even the amount that is staying is also, if the natural ones are staying in a picomolar is a very, very tiny amount, whereas the ingested one, the one which is mimicking that now, semaglutide, is almost to 10,000 times of that. That much amount is there in the blood for a long duration. And another thing what we need to be worried about is this is not a drug like, paracetamol or atenolol or any other BP drug, which are something called small molecule drugs, which are chemically synthesized. But this semaglutide or any other GLP-1 or dual analogs, these are peptides. These peptides, in fact, are called biopharmaceuticals. They require very, very high, something like your insulin injection, that's also a biopharmaceutical. So this requires a very high cautious method of production, engineering, preservation, cold chain, everywhere the degradation can happen and even immunogenic reactions can happen. Body can reject that. That can happen. All problems associated with the biopharmaceutical. That also people need to be worried. Yes, again, coming back to our pharmaceutical, yes, we are working on, we have in fact few of the weight loss medication, which I'm sure I'm not entitled to market here on this platform, but there are, doctors will definitely be the right people, but there are works going on. In fact, even to have a natural GLP-1 and loss, we are working on that.
Yeah, good to hear that, Doctor. So I think with this, our conversation would probably pause for now, and we look forward to more conversations and some future uh, chats like this. So now from the audience side, if you have any questions, we will have the next 10 minutes addressing your questions. You can
Sure.
feel free to probably unmute yourself, ask or drop your question in the chat box. Okay. So somebody is wanting to know what is your product on weight loss from Matrimed.
Yeah. Again, I wouldn't want to ask, talk about the product, which is not right on a public platform like this. Again, that can go as a unprescribed one. But I would suggest there are products, not just, again, don't go back to a product scenario. Oh, this I think our some doctor only has asked. Okay. Probably Dr. Kumar, I will send you across my representative to talk about this. If I know where your clinic or where you practice, let me know that and I will send you across. Because I feel, again, we should not go into, in a general public platform, public should not be, again, lured with some
Yeah.
products.
True,
I
true,
would
true.
say,
Please.
again, go back to your food, go back to exercise, go back to right kind of lifestyle, because that is the key thing. All rest of the things, rest of interventions that we plan to do, either through natural or unnatural means, should only be a small part of
Correct.
management.
Anyway, many times, so most of the times we do use the combinations, the polyhobal
Yes,
combinations
yes,
process,
exactly.
along with whatever other treatment interventions
Yes,
we may
exactly.
yeah.
Depending on each individual,
Yeah.
some may require different kind of kashayam to be added to that. We have so many medications,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that sort.
yeah. So, anybody else would like to ask your question? You can also unmute and probably post your question.
Great, sir. I've noted your address. I will send you my representatives there. In fact, the lifestyle disorders, we are talking only about type 2 diabetes more, everybody is talking. PCOD is another, offshoot of this problem. So that's also rising in the, so for everything, all these problems, the cure will be the same, the lifestyle change. And that has to start whatever is the method of management. So better to start earlier than later.
Yeah. I think Olympic,
Yes, Ozempic
it
very much. Within, in fact, 52 months more weight than they earlier had. That much of almost 100% weight. In fact, appetite actually comes back very soon after stopping. Yeah, the injection is taken.